Okay, so I will grant you that there are 100 different ways I could have made a better animation for this tutorial. But there's a reason. There's a reason why it's the way it is, and that's because it touches upon some really important fundamental basics that you could go a long way with should you master them. So I'm no longer interested in any of this. Let's close the tabs of all the composites. Yep. And you'll notice how I've tucked all these neatly in this folder right here. You can click the folder button to do this and just give it an appropriate name when you're done. Now I'm going to start a new composite shot. You can do it from here or you could do it from here. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to give it a name and reduce the duration by 20 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing a plane, and you can right-click your way to it, or you could just press the plus button here. The color is really inconsequential at this stage, because I'm going to be using a gradient. I'm going to name this background before I press the OK button. I just noticed that I had gradient typed up already, but I'm going to delete it and just redo this just so you guys can see how I got here. Then I'm going to grab color gradient and throw it onto the layer. Apparently nothing's happening, but that's because if you go down here, the blend mode is set to add by default, which is useful in certain cases, but not for ours at the moment. So I'm going to turn this to none. And as you can see the black and white as designated in the interface, but it's a bit transparent, so I'm going to turn up the opacity to 100 because by default it's coming down to 75. There you go. And that's how a gradient usually looks like. Like all standard gradients, the start and ending points are designated with black and white. I'm going to swap the black for white and the white for a very light blue, almost a lilac color. I can maneuver the colors using the handles displayed here, but I prefer the numerical values located in each of their properties. The right numbers are the y-axis, the left being the x-axis. Now it looks like a nice bluish faded horizon, which I like. I suggest that you make a habit of locking layers when you know you won't need to alter it anymore. Clicking the lock button does the trick. Unlocking them is just the same. As you can see, no changes are happening. It is locked. Let's add a plane. I'm going to give it a dark blue color. It'll work with the default blending parameters of the effect I'll add later. In the View panel, I'm going to select the Ellipse Mask tool, which is this oval-shaped icon you see here. Draw across the plane and hold Shift to maintain the aspect ratio. Masks are effectively your show and hide tools. They work with the regions you specify, giving effects and layers a defined shape. They're the bread and butter of all that is motion graphic. Notice that you see two transform properties. The one that I'm drilled into at the moment is very specific to the mask. It does not affect the entire plane. Its sole purpose is to manipulate the mask and what it's showing or hiding depending on the blending mode. I will manipulate the position to center this a little more. I'm going to throw in a radial gradient. For the outer radius, I'm going to turn the smooth property to 0. Then for the inner radius, I'm going to dial it down to 24. Finally, I'm going to manipulate the properties of the center position. As always, make sure to label everything. Now, just as a touch-up, I'm going to add a drop shadow. Shadows, like in real life, tend to give objects a better sense of definition. Nice, but a little too sharp for my taste. I'm going to manipulate the distance. I eventually found 2.5 to be the sweet spot. Also, lowering the opacity to 0.35 gave it a less burnt out look. I'm happy with this. Now I'm going back to the masks, and for reasons you're about to see, I'm going to rename it Shaping Mask. Now, because I want to introduce another mask with the exact same properties, I can just duplicate this by pressing Ctrl D. And I'm going to rename it Deductive Mask. I'm going to change the blending mode to subtract as opposed to add. Now all I have to do is just keyframe and manipulate the position of the deducting mask to do the reveal that was happening at the beginning of the presentation. The reveal is done, but the edges are just not soft enough. I'll head over to the shape properties of the mask and introduce a feather. Make sure that the setting is out and not both. As you can see, the animation just got a little softer. It's a little too fast though, so I'm going to go back to the position of the mask and distance the keyframe a little bit. Now for text, I'm going to go over to the viewer panel, pick the text tool, draw across the position that I'd like, and just type in ominous records. Because I already adjusted these font properties in the previous composite, it already knows what font I want. You can go back to the text tab over here to manipulate them. Just make sure that your text is highlighted when you try to shift the properties. Otherwise, it won't take effect. Now I'm going to introduce an opacity keyframe, which is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to go over to the opacity properties of the text, keyframe the beginning to 0. Then I'm just going to gauge and see where I'd like to position the endpoint against the globe animation and dial in 100%. Okay, I really want to keep my videos as short as possible, so I'm going to end here and make a part 2, which I would gather would take around between 3 to 4, 5 minutes.